Number three, holding of Indian Civil Service examination, both in England and India at the same time. That was a demand. Whenever you have this competitive exam, it should be held at the same time or the same day. That was the demand. Fourth, spread of both general and technical education. The government should open schools and educate the people technically. Some technical subjects should be introduced so that the people can master these professions and apply for a job. Therefore, we see a few technical schools were open. Number five, wider employments of Indian higher service. It was a demand that Indians should be allowed to get higher posts. Then, number six, people's right to carry arms. That is, carry an arm or a weapon with a license. And lastly, appointment of royal commission. A commission by the Queen should be appointed, and this commission should look into the administration of India, how India is being ruled, and what are the demands of the people. That should also be looked into. So there was a demand. That is the end of this chapter. Any doubts, children? Please let me know.
Then what is Ryotwari system?
Once again, Nishan,
What is Ryotwari system?
what is?
Ryotwari system.
Okay, Rayatwari system. Okay, now Rayatwari system, which means every individual farmer who was known as a Rayat, RYOT, they would pay their share of revenue. But here the village will pay as one unit as a Rayat, but the individual farmer's share was fixed. That is Rayatwari system. In Zamindari, the farmers have to pay to the Zamindar. Here the village as a unit collected the revenue and gave. That is Rayatwari. Anybody else? Okay, children, we have to move ahead. Now the third and fourth chapter, we will do it together, because often you get a comparative question from third and fourth chapter. Please look at your syllabus first. What is your syllabus? That is page 6 there, according to your old book. Second, first phase of Indian national movement, 1885 to 1907. Objectives and methods of struggle of the early nationalists, and any two contribution of the three leaders, Dadabhai Naroji, Surendranath Banerjee, and Gopal Krishna Gokhale. See, the syllabus mentions any two contribution. We will do more than two, because if you forget those two, you can remember the others. Then the second phase of Indian national movement, brief mention of the causes of the partition of Bengal and its perspective by the nationalists. Brief mention of Surat split. Then we come to objectives and methods of radicals. Now, radicals here are the assertive nationalists. I'll let you know this later on. And any two contribution of the three leaders, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, and Lala Lajpat Rai. So, chapter 3 or 4, you get a comparative question. If you look at page 143, there is a comparative study of the early nationalists and the assertive nationalists. Page 143. There are different headings: the basic belief, the ultimate object, their program and method of struggle, and their achievements. So third and fourth chapter will be a comparative one. Therefore, let us begin now. India's freedom struggle could be divided into three phases or four phases. Okay. The first phase is from 1885 to 1905. This is the phase of the early nationalists. That is the Congress at the beginning. Those leaders were known as early nationalists. Then the era of assertive nationalists. Some of the Congress members were not happy. They broke away from the parent body because they wanted to use force as a method of freedom struggle. The early nationalists believe in constitutional methods. Third, when Gandhiji joins the Indian national movement. And finally, we have the final phase when India gains independence. So these are the four phases of Indian nationalism. Number one, the early nationalism. Number two, the assertive nationalism. Number three, era of Gandhi. And last, the final phase. So let me give you a brief mention about the early nationalists and why were they called moderates. Remember, children, another word for early nationalists is rather moderate. You can write it there or underline somewhere in the book. The early nationalists also were known as moderate. Now, why were they known as moderate? It is with their approach. The first thing, they only represented the educated class, the middle class, lawyers, doctors, teachers, and newspapermen. So those who were learned, they belonged. They were not concerned with the entire mass. Number two, they had unlimited faith in the British sense of justice. They believed if India has to develop, it will be under the British rule. That is unlimited faith in the British sense of justice. Third, they only asked for constitutional reforms, reforms within the constitutional frame. In other words, their demands were moderate. They asked for basic rights. And lastly, their method of struggle was moderate. That means they wrote petitions, resolutions, memorandums to the government demanding for certain basic rights. So what we see, these people were moderate in the struggle and the demands were also moderate. That is why they are called moderate. So remember, if you get a question with regard to the moderate, it means the early nationalists. And some of them were, if you know, W.C. Banerjee, the first president of the Congress. Second was Dadabhai Naroji, Surendranath Banerjee, and many others. I hope this is clear why they were known as moderates or the key characteristic of early nationalists. Now, according to the syllabus, we must know the objectives, their methods of struggle. Now we have in the book, the objectives are divided under the following heads: constitutional, administrative, safeguarding civil liberties, economic reforms. So I want someone to read here, and if you have any.
Sir, may I read?
Okay, Nandini, constitutional reforms.
Constitutional reforms. They ask abolition of the India Council. Second, the Congress at its very first session asked for the expansion of the Legislative Council created by the Act of 1861. The central and provincial councils both should have a considerable proportion of elected members. These councils should be given more power. All legislative measures and financial questions, including budgets, should be submitted to the councils. Early in the 20th century, the Congress leaders insisted on colonial form of self-government, that is, the system of administration to be found in the dominions of Canada and Australia.
Okay, so the basic constitutional reform, in short, I'll tell you that the Congress wanted expansion of the councils, whether at the national level or at the provincial level, the provinces, so that more Indian peoples could be elected and form a part of the government, whether at the province or at the national level. That was the demand. Expansion of the legislative councils. Secondly, they wanted a, a kind of government that is self-government, not complete independent. Remember this, self-government with the British as their ruler. They wanted Britain to rule over India, but give Indian people a chance to govern themselves. So this is called colonial form of government. That means they prefer to be under the subjugation of the mother country, that is England. Carry on, Nandini. Administrative reforms.
Administrative reforms. The Congress urged upon the government to give effect to the following reforms. First, wider employment of Indians in the higher services. Second, holding of simultaneous examinations both in England and in India for recruitment to the Indian civil service. Third, adequate representation of the Indians in the Executive Council of the Viceroy and those of the governors. Fourth, complete separation of executive and judicial functions. Fifth, an increase in the powers of the local or municipal bodies and reducing official control over them.
Okay, children. Administrative reforms. They wanted wider employment. The government should provide employment, and especially the higher services should be open for the Indians. As one of the demands earlier by the Congress, holding of Indian civil service examination in India and England at the same time. Then enough people should be there in the council of the governor and the viceroy at the national level and the provincial level. That is adequate representation. Then they wanted the separation of executive and judicial functions. The rulers should not interfere with the courts. And lastly, to have more powers in the municipals. These were the administrative reforms. Carry on. Economic reforms.
Economic reforms. The early Congress leaders demanded first, reduction in land revenue and protection of peasants against unjust demands of the zamindars. Second, giving of cheap credit or loans to the peasants through agricultural banks. Third, total abolition of salt tax and the duty on sugar. Fourth, industrial growth through trade protection, that is, a heavy tax on imported goods. Government should make loans for the growth of iron, coal, paper, and sugar industries. Reduction in expenditure on the army and the money thus saved to be spent on social services such as health and education.
Okay, in short, the demand was to help the poor farmers. They should pay less taxes. Government should be there to help the poor by giving loans. That is in short. There's nothing much to explain there. Then safeguarding civil liberties.
Safeguarding their civil liberties. First, early congressmen opposed tooth and nail the suppression of the freedoms of speech and expression. Second, they were demanding rights to assemble and to form associations. Third, the Congress believed that the suppression of a free press would not check sedition or rebellion against government, it would only drive it underground.
They believed in, or rather, they had unlimited faith in the British sense of justice and fair play. They believed that the longer Britain's rules over India, it will be for the benefit of the country. Therefore, they had unlimited faith in the British sense of justice and fair play. Number two, they looked to England as an inspiration and guidance because they were of the opinion that India has become a modern. It was because of the English people, the English laws, the English education. Therefore, in future also, they would look up to England for guidance. Third, Dadabhai Naroji, he said India had benefited from English rule because of the English rule that we got the English language, the modern means of communication and transport. So if the English stays in India, in the long run, India will develop. India can become a modern nation. So these were the beliefs of the early nationalists. And remember, they are also known as the moderates. We remember the method of struggle was moderate. So what means did they adopt? Number one, petitions to government officials. They wrote letters, petitions. Number two, resolutions. They sent resolutions. Third, they met in the towns and cities and the countrywide and they informed the people about the problems and the strong policies of the government. Fourth, distribution of leaflets and pamphlets criticizing government policies. Fifth, preparing memorandum. That is a written report which would be submitted to the government or the committees. And then this matter would be referred to the British Parliament. Number six, sending delegations of leading Indians to England. A group of people will go to Britain and they will raise their concern in the British Parliament. And if you remember that when the East India Association was founded in London, the president was Dadabhai Naroji. So the main aim here was to inform the British Parliament about the wrongdoings in India, and this East India Association had raised the voice of the Vernacular Press Act. So thus we see that the moderates applied simple means, constitutional means, writing letters, sending petitions and all, to voice for their demands. At no time they put pressure or use force or boycotted Indian goods. Never. They were moderate in their approach. next heading, official attitude towards the Congress is not in your syllabus. Failures and achievement is not in your syllabus. But I will brief you about these. Official attitude at the beginning, the government welcomed the Congress because they thought if they fulfill the demand of the Congress, they would not revolt against the government. So the Congress got the support of the British at the beginning. But later on, when the Congress demanding more and more rights, the government went against the Congress and they started appeasing the Muslims. That is, they started playing the policy of divide and rule. That is the official attitude in short. Failure achievements, children, is not there. When we have free time, I will explain this. But now let us come to prominent leaders in the early days of Indian nationalism. And according to the syllabus, 3 leaders are given. You have to know any 2 contributions. So we have Dadabhai Naoroji, Surendranath Banerjee, and Gopal Krishna Gokhale. So number 1, let us read about Dadabhai Naoroji. He was known as the grand old man of India. Remember, sometimes the question is, who was the grand old man of India, and mention any 2 contributions. So you might get confused. So underline, he was known as the grand old man of India, Dadabhai Naoroji. His contribution, number 1, he was India's unofficial ambassador in England. So he went to England on behalf of the Indians. The British Parliament did not call him. The Indians sent him to England as an ambassador, where he founded the East India Association to inform the British of the 2 states of affairs in India. That is, to inform the British Parliament how India was being administered, how India was being ruled. And he also demanded that the ICS examination should be held simultaneously both in England and India. So that is his contribution as an ambassador. He raised the grievances of the country and also demanded for holding of ICS examination at the same time in England and India. Second, he was one of the founder members of the Congress, and he was also the president of the Congress. Therefore, he played an important role as a congressman and as the president of the Congress. Third, his historic address to Kolkata session. It was at the Kolkata session that Dadabhai said Swaraj is the main aim of India, independence. So this cry or the attainment of Swaraj was voiced at the Kolkata session. And it was in this session that the resolutions of Swaraj, Swadeshi, boycott and national education was passed. Then, fourth, his enunciation in the nature of British imperialism and the cause of poverty. He exposed how Britain was taking away the wealth of India in his famous drain theory and views on Indian economy. Remember, he was editor of Ras Goftar and started a magazine, Dharma Marg Darshak. Through these papers or magazine, he tried to highlight the condition or the plight of India, how India was becoming a poor nation. That is the drain theory. How was the money was being taken away from India? Number one, salaries payable to the member of the Indian Council. Used. Indians political justice, giving them the constitutional rights that is expected by the people of India. Next, we take up Surendra Banerjee. Surendra Banerjee was known as the Indian Burke. Burke refers to the famous orator of England. So Surendra Banerjee was a very good orator, or rather a speaker. And the audience heard him, they were convinced by his speech and they were ready to follow him. Because he was known as the Indian Burke, just as Baba Banerjee was known as the, what was he known as? Grand old man of India. Very good. Grand old man of India. Remember, Surendranath had competed for the ICS examination in 1869 and was appointed the assistant magistrate of Chile. But he was removed from the service on false charges. Let us look at his contribution. Fight against injustice and repression. He was the founder of Indian associations, just like Baba Banerjee formed the East India Association. Surendranath formed the Indian Association. And it was through this association that he backed off political reforms in India. Also underlined, he protested against the reduction of maximum age limit. Number two, he was against the Arms Act. And number three, the Vernacular Press Act. Therefore, he raised his voice against the injustice done. Then he believed that Indians should be elected and be a part of the councils, and through councils they should fulfill their elective duties, that is, to ask for political rights. And in short, what he meant that people could be elected in the councils and serve the people. If they want to serve the people, they have to fight elections. Then we have, he convened the Indian National Conference. And the Indian National Conference was an important event which saw the birth of the Indian National Congress. Therefore, Surendranath played an important role in uniting all the associations Means to achieve goal. He believed once again like this. give them Indians to serve the people. And he believed also that the role of the executive should not interfere in judicial matters. Therefore, he wanted the separation of judicial from the executive. Third, he established the servants of Indian society. And it was through this society he created a feeling of patriotism, nationalism among the members of the society. Therefore, he promoted nationalism. And he also worked for the education of women and elevation of the distressed class. Last but not the origin of national awakening. So what did he demand through his speeches in the Imperial Legislative Council? He asked for reduction of salt duty, abolition of excise duty on cotton, the third point that is about Africa, that is to give relief to the Indian rivers and He also demanded that the budget should allocate enough money for primary education of children. And last, Indians should be appointed in the Indian service examination. Indians should be accommodated in this administrative service. Let me complete this student. Last topic. His economic ideas included for reduction of land revenue, giving cheap credit loans to the peasants, and he wanted the government to protect the industries at the initial state protection of infant Indian industries, and he called for employment of members of the educated middle class. The government would provide jobs for the educated middle class. So this is all about